The storm hit the mountains like a wounded animal, howling, clawing, tearing through the pines, just as Ethan Hill dragged his half-frozen son through the snow toward the only cabin with smoke still coming from its chimney. His breath was ragged, his heart beat loud enough to drown out the thunder, and every step felt like a battle against a world determined to swallow him whole. Inside that cabin, waiting for him, was the last person he ever expected to see in a place like this. The woman whose decisions had shaped thousands of lives. The woman who had indirectly shaped his own, Amelia Rowan, the untouchable CEO whose power was legendary. And as lightning burst across the sky, illuminating her silhouette in the doorway, Ethan realized his night was about to become even more complicated. If you believe in kindness, hope, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kind Tales. It helps us bring more stories of heart and humanity to you. The storm closed in behind them with a roaring finality as Amelia pulled them inside. The warmth was immediate, but the tension was sharp enough to cut. Ethan had known Amelia years ago, briefly, distantly, like a shadow crossing his early dreams. Back when she was simply Amelia, the girl who smiled at him in college hallways before life took her up the corporate ladder and took him somewhere very different. They hadn't spoken in almost a decade. He hadn't even known she owned the cabin he'd stumbled into. Life had separated them, changed them, hardened them, and now fate had thrown them into the same space with nothing but a fire, a frightened child, and a storm that sealed every exit. Ethan's son, Noah, clung to his father's jacket as Amelia helped remove his soaked boots. The CEO's perfectly manicured world had never included children, at least not publicly, but in that moment she held Noah's cold little feet as if they were something precious, her movements surprisingly tender. Ethan watched, conflicted, grateful yet uneasy. Amelia Rowan was not a woman known for softness. She was steel, ambition, skyscrapers, and headlines. Yet here, her eyes were gentle, and something unspoken flickered behind them. As the wind battered the windows, Ethan tried to process everything at once. He had come to these mountains for peace, for Noah's sake, for a silence that could drown out the grief still lingering from the accident that stole his wife 2 years earlier. The world had moved on quickly, but Ethan had not. He had become a man suspended between keeping everything together and falling apart quietly in the middle of the night. And now this unexpected collision with a past that had almost been something more. The cabin creaked as the storm intensified, shaking the walls like a warning. Power flickered, then vanished entirely, plunging them into a dim amber glow from the fireplace. The temperature dropped fast. Ethan layered blankets around Noah, who soon fell asleep near the fire, exhausted. Amelia watched them with an unreadable expression, her posture strangely vulnerable without the armor of her city life. As the night deepened, the room grew colder. Amelia's breath made soft clouds in the air. Her hands trembled slightly despite the fire. She tried to hide it, of course she did, but Ethan noticed. He always noticed everything about her, even back then. The storm was merciless, and the cold seeped in through every crack. Amelia pulled her coat tighter, fighting a losing battle. Ethan offered her the thicker blanket, the only one left. She shook her head stubbornly, insisting he and Noah needed it more. Pride, he thought. It hadn't changed. But neither had his instinct to protect. Hours passed slowly. The fire thinned, struggling to survive. Amelia shivered harder. Ethan felt his own fingers numbing. Knew hypothermia was a real danger for all of them. The silence between them grew heavy with unsaid things, memories, and questions that had died years ago but were suddenly resurrecting in the cold. Then, just past midnight, Amelia's voice broke through the storm like a fragile thread. She stepped closer, her face half-lit by the fire, her eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. Ethan, her voice cracked slightly. I know it's awkward. I know it's been years. But, can I slip under your blanket? Just until the fire comes back. Just so I don't freeze. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't seduction. It was raw humanity, quiet, scared, and real. Ethan hesitated only for a heartbeat before lifting the edge of the blanket. Amelia slid beneath it carefully, mindful of Noah, her movements slow, her breathing unsteady. Their shoulders touched, warm skin against chilled skin, and something ancient and familiar stirred between them. Not romance. Not yet. Something simpler. Something like trust rediscovered. As the storm raged through the night, they sat in a tense, intimate silence. Amelia eventually spoke first, her voice barely above the crackle of the dying fire. She told him why she had come to the mountains. Burnout. Pressure. Expectations that had crushed her spirit. Millions believed she was invincible, but tonight, beside him, she confessed she'd been falling apart in ways the world would never see. Ethan listened quietly, recognizing the ache beneath her words, the loneliness she tried so hard to hide. He told her about Noah. About the nights he still woke reaching for a wife who wasn't there. About the fear of raising a child alone, never being enough, never healing fully. About how coming to the mountains was his attempt at learning how to breathe again. The storm outside softened slowly, hour by hour, until the first pale light of dawn slipped through the frost-covered window. By then, Amelia's head rested on Ethan's shoulder, and his hand had found hers without thinking. Not as lovers. Not yet. As two broken humans finding warmth in the ruins of their separate battles, when morning finally arrived, the world looked different. The storm had cleansed everything, trees, sky, and maybe something inside both of them. Noah woke up smiling, safe and warm, unaware of the silent shift that had occurred. As they stepped outside the cabin together, snow crunching under their boots, Amelia looked at Ethan with an expression that was no longer guarded. Something had opened in her. Something hopeful. She wasn't the unreachable CEO in that moment. She was simply Amelia, the girl he once knew, and the woman he was beginning to understand anew. They parted ways hours later when help arrived, but not before Amelia asked if she could see him and Noah again. Ethan didn't promise anything grand or romantic. He simply nodded, because for the first time in a long while, nodding felt right. Life, they both realized, sometimes traps you in a storm just to show you who can weather it beside you.